Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Shabbat Tov, Shabbat Tov. My name is Sina Kahen. I will say a huge thank you to Michelle, the Parat Yosef family, for allowing us to host our Sunday night shiur here in your beautiful, beautiful Bet Knesset. Just a little bit of an introduction for you all about the Habura. We're an online and physical Bet Midrash dedicated to the Sephardi Derech Halimud. And we were very honored to have Rav Makbili here tonight in London, here this week. It's very, very rare to have somebody who is an expert in Torah Harambam from the Judeo-Arabic and from the Hebrew. It's not an exaggeration to say that there are probably a handful of people who really understand Harambam in the original sense. And we are very honored to have one of those Chachamim here tonight. Rabbi Makbili is in charge of the Mishneh Torah project, publishing the greatest works of Harambam into Hebrew, as well as republishing, based on the accurate manuscripts, the Mishneh Torah. And at the same time, he is living up to the Maimonidean ideal, a software engineer at Johnson & Johnson and a lecturer at Technion University. So if we are thinking of a role model who lives up to Torah Sefarat, Torah Harambam, we really have a Hacham here of the highest caliber, and we are so honored to have him here with us. He's given a shiur to the Habura before. Now in London, he's able to give it in person, and please God, the start of many more. He's just published a new book on Tumah and Tahara, and tonight we'll be exploring that. I recommend everybody to follow Mifal Mishneh Torah online, search for the Mishneh Torah project, search for Rabbi Yohai Makbili, and stay in touch. And please God, this will be the start of many more Habura events and work done together with this beautiful community. Rabbi, it's a real honor to have you on the stage of Habura.
Thank you very much. It's really my honor to be here and see that how you're starting a new thing. It's not a new thing, but for me, it's the whole Habura and where everybody, each of you, trying to gather together and to hear Maimonides' thought. I'll say something about myself. When I was 15 years old, I learned it in a yeshiva, and the way of learning in the yeshiva bothered me, because there was something bothers me. I couldn't figure out why. But I started to learn by myself things. And one of my friends told me, you should start reading the introduction of Rambam to the Mishnah. Akdama lePerush HaMishnah. And I remember that night. It was Friday night. I was almost the only one in the Bet Midrash. And there was 400 seats in the Bet Midrash, and I read Maimonides' Hakdama lePerush HaMishnah, and I returned back to where I had to spend the night. I was learning in the dormitories, and there was like lightning all the way back. And what I have read is that Maimonides teach me that God is everywhere. I mean, to learn about life and to learn Torah, you can do it from seeing the way the word is managed, the way creatures are managed, and everywhere there is the actions of God, and you can learn from it. Later I understood that this is called Maaseh Bereshit. And I was fascinated by this idea. And I started to learn more and more Rambam, and as much as I learned, I was fascinating more and more. I mean, the holistic view of life. Not just set what is needed now and what you have to do, but what you have to think. the way you have to think. And years after, I had a vision to make the Rambam available for everyone, accessible for everyone, but in a different way. The old generation did it. I didn't want to deal with how the Rambam formulate his halachot, where it's kind of genealogy, where the Rambam took the halachot from, the relation between Rambam and Gemara, but to understand the Rambam itself and where you can take it as an inspiration. Not backward, but forward. And so my first project was to take the Rambam, take the exact nusach of the Rambam, the exact text of the Rambam, based on manuscripts. One of them is the manuscript here in Oxford, and Bodleian, that is the name of the library in Oxford. And there is a difference between the common text of the Rambam and the accurate one. And it's very important, because if you understand the accurate version of the Rambam, you don't need to letaretz be'ivrit. You don't have to find, okay, why the Rambam wrote that way, because it is clear what he wrote. And so my first project was creating one volume Mishnah Torah in one volume, and it is not just the size of the volume. It is the idea that you can handle the whole Torah in one hand. Exactly, Yad Chazakah. You have to be, but that was the idea. You can understand. You can read the whole Torah in a one volume book, as a concise, from all the Talmud and all the Midrashim and all whatever. That was the first project, of having one volume, accurate text with indexes, and so everyone can understand it. The second effort was to create a concise commentary based on that, and that I made there are many versions of it, in 14 volumes, in 4 volumes. There's an application, there is a pocket size, a hardcover and soft cover. It's online, and the main idea of this commentary is to explain the Rambam according to the Rambam. Because for many years, people explained Rambam according to Rashi and Tosfot, because that's the interpretation of the Talmud. But the Rambam, as a Sephardic thinker, he read the Talmud in a different way than in Provence. So, it's okay?
Yeah.
So that was the Rambam according to the Rambam idea, and I did it with a great collaboration with many people in the academic world and in the yeshiva world, and institutions like Mechon HaMikdash, Mechon Torah VeHaaretz, Mechon Mishpatei Eretz. I mean, there are many people who helped that happen. And I was the interpreter and the chief editor of everything. So I wanted it to be as simple as it can be. And hopefully, and eventually, it became the initiator of the daily Rambam, Rambam Yomi. Because until then, people read the Rambam, but even without understanding, and it really bothered me. This is not the way the Rambam itself wanted it to be. So that was my second project, and I did it in a half duty from my algorithm engineer in J&J, in Johnson & Johnson. In Israel, I'm algorithm developer of heart rate diseases, so atrial fibrillation and so on. And the third, after I finished that, the third project was to the Guide of the Perplexed in 3 volumes. It was 6 or 7 years. Project with many peoples and many. Rambam itself is like a university. Okay, he encompasses many fields: philosophy, Arabic philosophy, Greek philosophy, halakha, hagut, machshava philosophy, and philosophy of the halakha, and many other issues. He was a scientist. He knew Aristotle very well. He controlled whatever could be read in its time. So I had to work with many people, and it was after I read the Guide for the Perplexed for at least 50 times. And this is in the commentary there is a combination between these 2 books. Okay, so many people for many years, this is not what is common today, but many people for many years thought that there are 2 Rambams, two kind of Maimonides, the Maimonides of the Guide and the Maimonides of Mishnah Torah. And I wanted to of course, I wanted to show that this is one man who handles each book with a different viewpoint, but not more than that.
You mentioned the Sephardic way of thinking.
Yes.
I want to understand what that means.
Okay, I think this is maybe a Sina can.
Habura.com /
because once we can, this is just a short introduction to what I want to talk and what I want to talk. I will show you that. I think you can manage along this lecture. And my last book was on Tahara, on impurity and purity, the terms which are very enigmatic. Right? What is Tahara and Tumah? Okay, we will deal with that. And this is concludes the background that I wanted to. Any questions about it? Short question before I will start about my main topic here. Okay, so let's talk about Tumah and Tahara. Tumah and Tahara are about third of the 613 mitzvot. And Tumah and Tahara are actually, Tahara is the entrance ticket to the temple, and whatever there is in the temple is relates to Tahara. But I have to do 2 introductions. First of all, there's several terms of Tumah and Tahara. For example, we can say that a pig is tameh, is impure. And we can say that a corpse is tameh. But these are different meanings of Tumah and Tahara. Because if you touch pig while alive, while he's being alive, you're not tameh. We use the term pig is tameh to mean that pig is not kosher. Okay, so I will not talk on this issue. And another example. a woman in a period, she is tme'ah lamikdash, but she is not tme'ah to her husband. She is asura to her husband. Okay? So there are two terms. One is of isur and heter, and one is of Tuman and Tahara. Tuman and Tahara relates only, or actually, almost only to the temple. Okay, so this one thing we have to set in mind. The term Tuman and Tahara relates to many other issues. I mean, the Bible says that if you're doing avodah zarah, idolatry, or gilui arayot, or shfichut damim, the land is tme'ah. The land is impure, but this is a third meaning. Okay? So what is that tum'ah and tahara? What is that? Why corpse is tameh? Why leprosy is tumah? Why woman who gave birth is tameh? Why salmon is tameh? Why?
Seven.
So I don't know why. Salmon. Sorry. My English is not as perfect as I see. And so why all these are tameh? What is behind all of this? Is this only hygienic? Is this only hygienic in terms of a primitive hygienic in the old world? So one of the major anthropologists in the last century was Mary Douglas. I don't know if any one of you heard of her, but she explored, she researched these terms in primitive tribes in Africa, and she came to a conclusion that impurity, where there is, they use the term impure, tameh or something like that, does not relate to hygiene. Impure does not mean not clean. It means something deeper in the thought. People, even primitive people, treats tameh as something not in its order, not in its place. So we can say, for example, the shoes in the refrigerator is not clean, even if the shoes are new shoes. Okay, we use, even in the modern life, it's not clean. There is, when someone has a garden and he wants to clean the garden from, I don't know how we call it in English, asab shote, from asavim. Weeds, okay. So we call that unclean weeds, okay?
Why?
Because they are not in their position as we want them to be. But there's nothing bad with these weeds. So taking that into account, we can start to figure. But before I will figure that, I will give you Rabbi Yehuda Levi. For example, attitude to Tumah and Tahara. Rabbi Yehuda Levi says that Tumah, whatever is Tameh, is a source of death. So, a woman in a period is a kind of death because the potential to give birth is fallen out, and that's a kind of death. And leprosy is a kind of death because you see the skin as a dead skin, and everything is a kind of death. Semen, for example, is a potential of a birth of life who didn't come to life. But what behind that idea is that Tum'ah points to something which has something negative in itself. I mean, leprosy, for example, is a dead skin. There is another attitude to relates to Tum'ah Tahara, and it means, according to the Rambam, there's nothing negative in something which is tameh. There's nothing negative with corpse. There's nothing negative with leprosy. What is negative is that it is negative just in relation to the temple only, but not in daily life. Okay? And the second thing is what is negative is not the thing itself, but how we treat it. And my mothers give an example of that. When there is a blood from a woman, so this is the same blood when she is in period and when she is after giving birth. But after giving birth, sometimes, there are times where the blood is pure, dam tohar. But this is the same blood, my mother says, according to halakha. So that's point that it is not the blood which is negative. It is God wants us to understand. God want to teach us something in regarding to how we regard to the blood. But there's nothing bad in the blood itself. You got that point? Okay. So I will give you more and more examples to convince you that Maimonides is right according to the halakha. Okay? And the examination of ideas should be only according to halakha. If someone has an idea which is not related to the halakha, okay, it's just a good idea. Maybe was an idea, but I don't know. I cannot test it. I cannot validate it if it's not according to the halakha. So let's take an example, and I show you that impurity relates to intent, to will, and to thought. Taking, for example, a corpse which is in a hospital. According to the halakha, according to the Torah, the whole room where the corpse is tameh. And the whole path from the room where the corpse is to the exit of the building is tameh. The whole path. But what if I thought of taking this corpse and bury him through a specific path, and I change my mind? I want to take the corpse and bury him in a different way, in a different path. So what the halakha says, that the original path, the tum'ah, whoever was tameh, who was in the original path, is actually now pure, and the current path is tameh. It's amazing. It's an amazing idea of how your thought can create impurity. Is that understood? And we can have many, many other halachot. For example, about leprosy. Leprosy is the most clear thing of which relates not to this thing itself. Because if someone has leprosy and he doesn't came to the Kohen, he's not tameh. maybe he has illness of leprosy, but he's not tameh. The only one who can decide that he is tameh is the Kohen. And what if the Kohen doesn't know, he's not a professional in leprosy disease. So he brings someone else who is professional, even if he's a stupid, even if he's even a katan. And this katan tells him, yes, this is leprosy, and the Kohen says, you are tameh. So the only one who decides he is tameh is the Kohen, but not the illness itself.
That's what Ibn Ezra said. So the Amar, the Kohen says you are tameh.
Yes.
The Timeh or Kohen. This is Amira Shelo Mitameh.
Exactly, according to his specific decision. And what if he cannot decide? So he's not tameh. And what if he is on his 7 days of wedding? So he postponed his decision. Okay, so and what if he is during the Chag? So he postponed his decision. And in these days, he is not tameh. So it's not a matter of something tum'ah, not the illness itself. Tum'ah is not a matter. It is not a matter of illness. If that point is clear, I can continue. If not, if that point is not clear, I can give you more example of that. Questions?
Kohen has to decide with his mouth? Or
Yes.
with his
mouth. Yes.
Just got a question. I'm not sure if it is a question you could answer, but going back, is there a reason that you come across why, if a girl is born, there's a difference from when a boy is born in order for the woman giving birth for the period of time that she's tameh?
This is the most difficult question between giving birth to a male and to a female. There is some ideas about that, but we will see it later. Okay. So this is the first part of this of this idea. First of all, being tum'ah is not a thing of an objective thing in life, but as a matter of will and intent. Okay. The second part of my research was, okay, I understand the characteristics of Tumah and Tahara. What is that? But what is the role of Tumah and Tahara? So I have to go back. If Tumah and Tahara relates only to the temple, what is the role of the temple? And why, when someone buries a corpse, he has made a mitzvah, why is impure to the temple? Someone has made a mitzvah, mitzvat ona, yachasei ishut. So why both of them, cannot enter the temple? They had made a mitzvah. Okay, so Maimonides has a thought. And generally he is misunderstood. Maimonides says that the whole target of the temple was to fight against idolatry. Okay? And people, that is the most complicated, most confused chapter in the guide. Where many Parshanim, many Rishonim have fought against him. How can it be? How can it be that the whole Mikdash is just to fight against idolatry? But we have to understand the Torah, the whole Torah, aims to teach us how to cope with the world, how to cope with ideas in the world, how to cope with life. And the idolatry has another way of how to cope the difficulties in life. And the Torah fight against their ideas by fighting against their deeds. Because ideas creates deeds, actions. And if I want to fight against these ideas, I have to fight against their deeds. Ideas comes to actions in a background of a specific culture. But the Torah itself is fighting against ideas. Because the ideas, no matter if these are ancient days or the updated these days, today's, we are still confronting the same ideas. Why are we living in life? Nothing has changed. Despite the technology changed, the culture has changed. But the basic questions of human life are still existing in the same manner that they have existed always. What is life? What is suffering? What is sexuality? All these things, the Torah deals with them and gives us a way of thinking, a way of attitude towards them. So the ancient culture have coped with these phenomena. For example, with death in a different way. That the Torah wanted us not to treat death as they treated death. And how they treated death? In a worship of death. They made a big worship of death. And that's the reason why death relates only to the temple. I know you have made a big mitzvah, but I don't want you to come with that connection to the death and to try to connect to God through that. I don't want you to make seances. And for example, I don't want you to there was a big worship of Avot. For example, Av Yidoni. Av is the same terminology as Av, our old ancestors. They wanted to connect to the old ancestors. There was a worship around that. Okay, so that was the idea of Tuva and Tahara. Is that any questions? So it is not the death itself that is the way people treat the death. And they treated the death in a bad manner, which the Torah fight against it. Okay, so now it is much clearer, the whole thing. And I will continue about in this direction. Do we today deal with death as the death bothers us? Of course, yes. People want to go to dead people. People want to go to Kibbutz Tzadikim and, for example, other issues. But not just in the religious sector, we're dealing with death. Also, for example, in Israel, the most national days are dealing with death. Yom HaShoah, for example, and the Memorial Day, which is very, very holy days in this thought. So the Torah says, no, I don't want you to deal with that in that manner. If there was a good idea, and for example, in the way the state of Israel thinks, so they would not bring ministers and prime ministers to Yad Vashem. They would bring prime ministers to Har HaBayit, to the Temple Mount. That's a source of life, not to a place of death. And it changed the whole view regarding life and death. But not only death was bothering the ancients and today. The second thing is sexuality. The ancients has made worship around sexuality. So, for example, there was a worship of sex and fertility. So, when a woman gave birth, they would bring her to their temples, and they were making ceremonies around that. And the Torah said, I don't want you to deal with any ceremony, with any temple. Do not come to the temple after giving birth. Stay in your home, build your life, and after 40 days or 80 days, you can come to the temple. In these 40 days or 80 days, you can be with your husband, not today. Today, there's no dam toha. Okay? So whenever there is a blood, intercourse is prohibited. And so whenever there is a worship of fertility, the Torah says, I don't want that in the Mikdash. And according to the Rambam, the reason why there is a prohibition of Gilui Arayot relates to this. Rambam says, if there was no Gilui Arayot, if Gilui Arayot was permitted, then the whole family was dealing the whole day and all times with this issue. Because every time this is accessible, and every time my brother sees his sister, and the mother sees her son, and the whole family was not a family. And that is the reason why there should be spaces which are innocent from any sexuality. So, take for example, there is a gzera of Chachamim that a child will not learn with a guy. Actually, it was in the times of the Greeks where actually homosexuality was part of the teaching. Plato says that this is the most way. This is the I don't know how to speak it in English. Nisgab. Which one? Elevated. And Chachamim says there is tum'ah on the goyim. According to the Bible, There is no Tumah in the Goyim. God is not impure and is not pure. This is not relevant to him. But we want you to treat the Goyim in some kind of impurity, ziva, which is a kind of sexual impurity. Because we want you to know that you cannot learn, a child cannot learn with a Greek teacher, where he can lead him to some kind of error or something like that. So we want spaces where there is no sexuality. There's no tension of sexuality. One of these places is the temple. One of these places is the family. One of these places is the learning environment. And that is the reason why there are impurities of that kind. The third kind of impurity was the leprosy. Leprosy was one of the most suffering disease. Not because of the disease itself, but because of the social reaction to this disease. People separated. Before the Torah itself, people separated the one who has leprosy, and his life was very, very bad. And then came the question of suffering. White people are suffering. The ancient world has made a ceremony, a false ceremony, to heal the one with leprosy. It involved several idolatries, actions, and so on. But leprosy does not have any cure, especially in the ancient days. It was based only on God's will when someone was cured from leprosy. And the Torah wanted to say that there are sometimes a kind of diseases that you cannot cure. And the big question was, okay, so what is providence? Why God does not mashgiach alai? What that means to me. And the Torah answer for that question is, first of all, I don't have a way to cure you. But do not go to any false curing process. Because they are false. They're not true. So the Kohen does not solve anything. He's not a doctor. When someone has leprosy and he comes to the Kohen don't solve it. Nothing. I will meet you just before, and I will meet you after you are healed from this disease. This is a life-changing set mind.
You just said there's no cure for it.
Yes, there's no cure for that.
So how can you see him after that? If there's no cure?
The only cure can come from God, not from the Kohen, and not from any other person, unless he is a Isha Elohim or Navi or something like that. But the Kohen does not deal with that. And now remind that in the Midrashim and there is a Lashon Hara which connected to the one who has leprosy. But the Rambam said that Lashon Hara of the one who has leprosy is not Lashon Hara between people. Ben Adam lechavero is between man and God. Ben Adam lemakom. what that kind of Lashon Hara, that kind of, there is no providence and Hashgacha and Klum. Why am I suffering? This kind of Lashon Hara. Rambam says that in the end of Hilchot Tzarat. But look it carefully.
Yeah, but where? Where exactly?
Chapter number 16. Okay? So this is very, very interesting because we know many people many people have Lashon Hara, okay? But not all of them have leprosy, of course, and even the ancient days. There is a miraculous leprosy in the Bible, in the whole Bible, okay? But I'm not talking about the miraculous leprosy. I'm talking about the native leprosy, which also Goyim, like Naaman, has had, okay? And this is a natural disease. According to the Rambam, only Tzarat Abayit, leprosy of home, and leprosy of clothes are miraculous. But Tzarat HaAdam is not miraculous. It's a nature disease. And what came behind that idea is the question of providence. Why life has so many evil? Why there are illness? Or why there are, and the Rambam has an answer to that question. Okay, this is the most complicated issues in the Rambam, which are the Rambam explained in many chapters in the guide. I will not come into that one. I will not dive into that issue. But now I can gather the whole things of Tumah and Tahara. Tumah and Tahara are actually situations which are prone to idolatry, and the Torah wants us to think in a different way from the idolatry thought. And that's why, and actually they want not just to treat us in a different thought, but these situations, these phenomena of death and whatever related to sexuality are not a way to connect to God. Right? These are permitted, these are very, very mitzvah, okay, but do not give them as a ceremonies to the temple. So that is the main idea, the main argument I made in this book, and what is particular in this effort in this book is that I connect everything to halakha itself, so you can see. So take for example a very, very strange halakha. You cannot. If you think there is a leprosy, you cannot heal it by yourself. You cannot limchok it. Why is that? Because there was a ceremonies of the idolatries to heal that surround. And God says, okay, you cannot heal that, accept that. And that is the main attitude we can inspire for today in the three aspects of death and the meaning of life. Life, the most center of life, the target of life is centered in life and not in death. The second one is that there are spaces we must have spaces where we don't enter into the tension of sexuality. And the third one is there should be a space for where we can accept the word, accept the way that this is in the word, because there could be, Rambam said that there could be no word without disease. Even God, listen to that, because it's very provocative and can be very misunderstood. Even God cannot create a man without disease. Listen to that. If he creates a man without disease, he creates an angel, but not a man. And God, of course, can create angels. But this is a matter of definition. There's no human being without Chomer. And Chomer is a subject to this. So God cannot make that in the way we understand it. So this is part of who we are. We can minimize the disease, of course, but we cannot abolish them at all. Because okay, this is a matter of what Maimonides told of Adam Rishon. Okay, but anyway, Adam Rishon was in 6 days of creation. This is not our word. Okay, this is why the world has been created. After 6 days of creation, there's no Adam Rishon. Who is confused?
No, I meant to say Adam Rishon was a creation in Gan Eden. Now it's out of Gan Eden. So the
Yes.
Bible agrees that Adam Rishon, while he was in Gan Eden, he could have been without disease. Right?
Not exactly, because the Rambam said something which is has to be understood about Adam Rishon and Adam and Eve, okay? Which is, I will tell you afterwards, okay? Okay. So that is the point. That is the point of Tumah and Tahara, and that's why Tumah and Tahara, as ideas, even though that we don't have a temple today, we can be inspired by how the Torah wants us to think about phenomena of life. And that was the whole point. Yes, questions?
Just understood. So Lashon Hara is only ben Adam v'Kadosh Baruch Hu. There's no Lashon Hara ben Adam
Of
v'Chavero.
course there is. Lashon hara ben Adam lechavero. There is. But according to the Rambam, this is not related to Tumah v'Tahara.
Another.
Yes.
When he said to go to cemetery, it was related to sadness.
Of course, there should be sadness.
What about Hilulot?
Okay. There are parts of Hilulot, you have to dive inside Hilulot. What is accepted and what is not accepted. Okay? But actually, I mean, for Rambam, you have to understand, there is a distinction. There is an observation between how I should treat death in a general perspective, and how I should treat death particularly, because death is part of life. Okay? וירא אלוהים כי טוב, וירא את כל אשר עשה, והנה טוב מאוד. רבי מאיר says, אפילו טוב מוות. So death is part of it, but you have to treat death in particular when there is a death of a close man as a very sad issue. Okay, you cannot be indifferent to death. Okay. Questions? Yes.
First of all, thank you. Secondly, Harambam in the Moreh says that if we had access to knowledge of the Sabians, the ancients, as you described,
Yes.
one of the ancient peoples, we would understand a lot of the things in the Torah.
Yes.
So do you think that it is our duty, it's almost our obligation, to see based on the knowledge that's provided today about the Sabians and these ancient people like you've done yourself, to understand aspects of the Torah? Is it an ongoing investigation that the Jews should be involved in to learn more about the Torah?
Yes.
By comparing it and contrasting it with the surrounding environment of where the Torah was given?
Yes, of course. We have to understand the ancients, but more than that, we have to understand the ideas of today threatening our life, our emunot, our Torah. These days, these threatening ideas which we have today, for example, the progressive, whatever is connected to that, are more complicated, are more threatening than the old idolatries. So we have to understand how the Torah helps us to fight against these ideas. And it is very, very a misunderstanding that the Rambam understood the Torah as archaeologist attitude. That the whole Torah fight against some ideas that are not exist anymore. These ideas are existing today, and every day in more intensive power. And we have to understand, because if we're not able to understand the ideas of today, we cannot cope with them either. And the ideas of today are much more threatening us. Yes.
Yeah, we shouldn't be trying to deal with them because we can't even understand 100% from the books that we have.
But we have to understand what are the sources of ideas which are emerging today and changing the whole life.
So can you give an example?
I think that might be another shiur.
But thinking, I will just give you a clue and you will continue, okay? Thinking about, for example, sexuality today. People says that their gender is part of their essence. And this is a kind of idolatry. Because we know that sex and sexuality and what is connected to that is a very powerful component of humankind, but it is not this is not at the essence of the mahut of our life. And this is very, very important, because the current idea is to convince people that this is their essential life. And you cannot talk with someone if you are threatening his essence. No, I'm not threatening your essence. This is not your essence. Even for straight people, this is not your essence. It is very powerful tool. It is very powerful component of man's life, but this is not essential of him. This is not the essence of humankind. The essence is how is your wisdom, is your consciousness, and something which is not connected to the Chomer. Okay, so I gave you just a clue of that, but it is very, very hard work to articulate that and to think about that. But we have to, because if we see life, the modern life, and the Torah life as not an answer, as not giving us a good response, so we are free of responsibility. Okay, the Torah is for the Bet Knesset and for the Shurim and for the learning from books, but not about life. The Torah teaches us about life and for every time, because again, the essential, the existential questions of our life is the same existential questions as was. Maybe they have developed, but they have the same sources. Okay, so
Thank you very much, Hacham.
thank you very
Thanks so
much.
for being here. Thank you everyone for being here as well. And we hope to have you in London again very, very soon. Thank you.
Thank you very
Bye.
much.